Hi, so has WoW become a horrible, boring grindfest? As was the title post of something I was looking at on the MMO Champion Forum. Now, just to cut a long story short, the answer to this one, in my view, is going to be no. This is not a rant video or anything like that. But I think it is probably now time where we can critically evaluate certain aspects of the game as they are now. In particular, the PvE content. I'm not a PvP player, so I'm going to steer well clear of that. But I was quite interested. The particular poster of this thread describes all of the sort of content in Legion there is to do the PvE content, and then pretty much describes it as Brainless Grind. Now I'm going to go through some of those, and I think with a lot of these things, of course, opinion comes very much into it. For grind, definitely there's an opinion side of that, because ultimately, what is grind? Grind is something, I think, in a game where, or even in life. I mean, life is a grind at times, isn't it? Plenty. If you look at the number of hours in a day when you're doing stuff that you're doing because you've sort of got to do it, you don't necessarily want to do it. Well, you could describe life as a brainless grind fest, or at least a grind fest. And no different in a game, such as a role-playing game like this, one that's designed to be played for many years. I mean, sometimes I think people compare an MMO with a single RPG. Well, the single RPG might have, 20, 30, 40, it might have, even 60 hours of gameplay on it. But it's not designed to keep you going for years and years and years. They want you to play that title. They want you to enjoy it so that when they bring a sequel out in a couple of years' time, you'll play that one as well. Well, MMO, I mean, the sequels are in the form of expansions, but they want us to continually play it. And of course, some do and some don't. But the brainless side of it, I think we can argue on firmer footing there, because that conjures up ideas that you could basically do it while focusing on something else. You're just going through the actions. And some of it will be. So, for example, we talk about LFR. A lot of the time, yes. In fact, Preach, didn't he? He did a video a few years ago with LFR. I think it might have been during MOP, where he deliberately went in with a character, and not only did he do nothing, but he stood in all the shit he could. It's like if some shit spawned and it wasn't under his feet, he moved to it. And I think he did like several wings and only got kicked once. And I think the same is sort of true now. People generally don't go for the vote kick unless either you're AFK when they're trying to go for a boss and you're not actually there, or you're offline or something, or if you wipe on it. If you wipe on a boss, okay, people start looking down the damage meters. You're not showing up on the damage meter. And some poor guy's going, but I'm a healer. Oh, not interested. Get gone. And even then, it's not a guaranteed thing. But generally speaking, yeah, you can be very, very poor in LFR. You can basically do nothing. Some people will maybe do the first couple of bosses and then deliberately go AFK on the last boss, assuming it's going to be a one-shot, knowing full well that people aren't going to really kick them mid-fight. I don't think you even can. And so there's a lot of that goes on. So is that brainless? It sort of is. If everyone was not focusing there, then the bosses, of course, would not die. But on an individual level, you can sort of think you can carry quite a lot of people in LFR, as long as you're not a tank, really. But if we look at some of the ones, so I'm going to go in the order that they went in. Now, first of all, World Quests. World Quests, something new for Legion. Brainless Grind. So in thinking of this one, first of all, this is a totally new type of content for Legion in terms of World of Warcraft. Similar things have been in MMOs before, other MMOs, but it's the first time it's been in this one. Difficult to judge. You've obviously got to take it from the point of view of what is it intended to be. It's intended to be quests. In fact, a lot of the world quests are quests that you did while you were leveling anyway. Some of them are new for level cap content, but it's designed to be like that. So to say it's brainless, is that, or a grind, is that really fair when quite a lot of them can be done really, really quickly within a few minutes? I'd say not. I'd also query the brainless side of it, because some of them actually require, like the current tour ones, certainly require you to focus and pay attention a little bit. I would say all of them. I know the Barrels of Fun, there's an add-on you can use to choose that. I don't use that. Where's the fun in that? And if people do choose to use that, then they're deliberately making it brainless for themselves. There are other ones as well where, you do have to think about what you're going to do and do it in the most efficient way possible. Even just deciding which 4 world quests, or 3 in the case of Kirin Tor, wants to do. because sometimes you usually get slightly more than that. I would like there to be a greater choice as well, by the way. I would like I sort of understand why they don't want that, because then, you know, people can, if there's too many world quests on offer, then arguably people will do more of them and get artifact power that way. But is that a bad thing though? I don't know. Maybe the other argument against that is the fact that you'll see the same ones coming up too frequently, because obviously, let's say they were to double the number of world quests that are available in anyone's zone, then that means you're doubling the frequency at which you're going to recognise another world quest. And they sort of don't, you know, they want it to be, oh, I haven't seen this one in a while, I'll do that one. As opposed to, oh, it's this one again day after day, and people go, I'm sick of it now. So they want to avoid that. I mean, it does happen sometimes because it's RNG. But I would definitely argue against it being brainless, because as I say, a lot of those world quests, some of them you can just go to an area and just, you know, do stuff and until a bar fills up, or if it's a single mob, like the Warden's ones, until it's dead. But some of them you do have to think about it. But also it's low-level stuff. It's only supposed to be like quests. So what do you expect? The next one, World Boss, Brainless Grind. It is, and it's actually a good thing it was, because let us compare world bosses as they existed originally in World of Warcraft, and I really don't think this would work at all. I don't know why anyone would want this. So the original world bosses were, and as they existed in Vanilla and TBC, they were actual raid bosses. The only difference between them and the ones in instances is they weren't instanced. But you wouldn't just get a random scrum of people all attacking it and expect it to go down. It wouldn't. It would absolutely wipe you. You had to be very, very careful, in fact. I mean, if there was a guild there actually attacking at that time, sometimes you get people griefing to screw it up for them. But generally speaking, you would wait your turn. You'd wait to see if they killed it or wiped, because there was no tagging then as well. If you hit it, you wouldn't get a tag on it because you weren't in their group. We didn't have this sort of open tag system then. And then if they wiped, then your guild would go and so on. And they were very, very bad. They only sort of worked in vanilla because, generally speaking, on a realm, there was probably only one or two guilds that were capable of killing it. And at any one time on that, you know, when it popped up, it was just whoever got there first. Particularly true when the Dragons of Nightmare came in. So nowadays, when you've got so many more raiding guilds, or even just people who want to do these things, you can't have it like that. You know, this. So it has to be a grindfest, because you're forming these random groups. You don't even talk to each other just to kill it. And so, yeah, it is a brainless grindfest, that one. But you only do it once a week, and it can't be any other way. Like, to even suggest it could be other way, it's like, what are you smoking? Now, time walking dungeons, brainless grind. Yes, that's because dungeons are a brainless grind, and almost always have been. When have they not been? They weren't in vanilla, but they haven't done time walking vanilla, and Blizzard have actually said one of the reasons for that is because those dungeons have been dumbed down from where they were. They're still not time walker friendly. And the other also, I think Blizzard said they don't, because they only want like 5 or 6, whatever it is, dungeons from a thing. They'd have to choose which ones and so on. But all the other ones, I mean, you talk about TBC. This person actually says, well, the TBC ones are all right because the dungeons were a challenge back then. No, there were heroic dungeons which were a challenge back then. Those are not reflected in the time walking dungeons. When I think about how you had to approach the heroic dungeons in TBC, you had to be careful about how you pulled some of the trash. You certainly didn't charge into trash and attack it where it was. You pulled it back to you, same as in vanilla. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in Time Walk in TBC. You just run into it and attack it, and you don't wipe. So to say they're a step up from the others, no, they're not. I don't see how people see they are. But after that, yeah, I mean, I wasn't around at the start of Cataclysm. I gather, and I believe it, that the dungeons that came out at the start of Cataclysm were very hard. The heroic ones, at any rate. But again, that's not reflected in the time walking ones. It's just not. They're again easy. And what's prompted this is the fact that it's the mop ones out at the moment. Very easy, just run from group to group, get the whole thing done in a few minutes. Yeah, and it is true. Mop was the first expansion where even the heroic dungeons were a joke. The heroic dungeons were just the level cap dungeons. You breezed through them even when you were a brand new level Was it 90? I think it was 90. Can't remember exactly. But when you got to level cap, you just steamroll through them. Even then. So yeah. But in terms of time walking, I defy anyone to tell the difference between the different expansions worth of dungeons from time walking, because all the time walking ones are just go through the whole lot quite quickly and easily, in my opinion anyway. And I'm someone who doesn't necessarily even remember. It's not like I know, oh, I remember this dungeon because I did it so many times. Quite a lot of them, so many years have passed, I don't actually remember them, but you still just go through them quite quickly and easily. The next one we talk about heroic and normal dungeons, Brainless Grind. Yes, as they have been for many years. That's not a feature of Legion. But again, to go back to when they weren't, you're really going back, again, potentially start a Cataclysm. But Blizzard, you could argue it all started from then, because Blizzard got bitten on the arse. Again, I gather, I wasn't playing at the time, I was taking a break. Good and hard for the fact that they were considered too hard. And so they're not going to do that again. They're not going to make them difficult, because this is content that everyone does. And I think what Blizzard do is they compartmentalize content. It's like, this is content that everyone wants to do. We can't make it very difficult. This is content that only the most competitive people want to do. We can make that difficult. And that's how it's going to be. So to complain that large sections of the content is Brainless Grind can well be true, but is it really a criticism? To suggest it's a criticism is to suggest that you only want competitive players playing the game. Well, how many players is that going to leave us with? If we're honest, not a lot. Not a lot. Quests, Brainless Grind. Well, then you might as well go back to World Quest. It's all the same thing. It's just quests. And again, what's it being compared with? When were quests... I mean, as I say, the quests are no more brainless than they ever have been. And I go back... I mean, vanilla you can argue, but that's because there was a lot of exploration to do. You know, part of the sort of thinking there was not how to complete the quest, although there sometimes was a little bit of that. Because sometimes in vanilla, like, let's say you had to kill... I remember something Duskwood, and you had to kill so many, like, Worgen before they were a playable race then. And there would be groups of Worgen in little camps, and then there'd be individual Worgen patrolling around. And if you were on your own, then you would generally try and pick off the patrolling Worgen. It would take you longer to do that quest. If you were in a group, you would go in and get the big group, because back then in your shitty little greens mostly, and you might have the odd dungeon blue, and usually these shitty little greens were like 10 levels out of date. You were not a very strong character, so you would get yourself, you would get your head kicked in if you ran into that group of them. Whereas now, yeah, you feel that, you know, you can go in and even on poorly geared outs, and you can go into groups, and as long as you're a bit careful, as long as you're not stupid, you're not going to die unless you bite off more than you can chew. So there is an element there. Maybe you did think a bit more in vanilla, and then of course there was what I was going to say in the first place was thinking about how to get there, because often you get a quest that wasn't just down the road; it was in another zone, maybe on another continent, and it'd be working out your path to get there. So yeah, you can argue it's a lot more brainless than that, but that went away when TBC came out. Like, the modern style of questing, I would say, was from TBC onwards. So to complain about it now, 10 years later, is really to complain about World of Warcraft and say you actually don't like World of Warcraft. Sorry. Mythic Plus. This one had to make me laugh. I mean, this one's got to be completely ridiculous. Brainless AoE grind with a very small movement skill part. Okay. So I can only assume that this person has completed a plus 30 recently with their group, and we just haven't heard about it. I mean, I don't even know who the person is. Some people, like I do, have their character in the signature, and some people don't. This person doesn't. So we don't know who this person is. But to describe Mythic Plus as a brainless AoE grind, yeah, I can only imagine what would happen to someone, especially in this week's affixers, you know, fortified, teeming and skittish, if someone went in and just AoE'd without putting their brain into gear at all. I can guess very much what would happen for a group that did that. It would not be pretty. They would certainly not complete the dungeon, at least on time. Heroism for every pack would be required. And then for some affixes, of course, you absolutely can't AoE. I mean, you imagine AoEing with raging, like all the way down. You can AoE him down a little bit, but then you have to switch. Have we got raging next week as well? I think we might have. That'll be interesting. So this one, I think at this point, if ever they had a serious point, they've just gone into, I don't like this game, but I think I used to like it a few many years ago, but I can't remember what it was about it I liked. So I'll just pretend that everything that's wrong with the game is new. Because, yeah, to describe Mythic Plus, I would say, is a big success of this game, of Legion, because it's a way of doing dungeons that you can keep pushing yourself if you so desire, and some people will. It combines the best features of challenge mode with something that's more accessible for everyone. Challenge mode, I never did challenge mode. It didn't appeal to me, not just because there wasn't any loot, just because it was like you had this small period of time when it might be good to do it, when it was difficult. And then after that, what was the point? When people used to say, oh, do you want to do challenge mode, to get the achievement, to get your transmogs? Like, no, I don't, because it's not challenging anymore. I would be basically just being boosted. So, and at the start of the expansion, I was more concerned with getting myself raid ready, and being a Retribution Paladin, it was not the easiest thing to find a group for challenge mode anyway. So if I wasn't going to do it like in the first lot, then there was no point in doing it at all. Now it's very different. Now we have a situation where it's accessible to everyone. You do it at whatever level that you're comfortable with, and you can keep pushing yourself. And if you find a like-minded group of players who want to do it, and never mind the gear, never mind the rewards, because beyond plus 15 they don't increase anyway, then sure, go for it. And if you want to do it on a week when there's very difficult affixes for extra bragging rights, brilliant. And it's a fantastic piece of content for that. To describe it as brainless is itself brainless, I would say, because it does require tactics, and you have to be very mindful. You can't actually treat the affixes the same. I sometimes get caught out, as people would no doubt have noticed on my first journey into Archway this week. In the first Mythic Plus I do of a week, when I sort of sometimes think, oh, what affixes is it? Oh, right, yeah. And I don't necessarily always plan brilliantly myself, because the first one you do is usually a much lower level one anyway, before you're actually pushing yourself. And then you have to sort of think, at least, or if you're sensible, you'll think beforehand, I suppose. Change your talents around potentially. In my case, I would change your legendaries about, bits of gear, because, yeah, you don't do the same dungeon the same way with different affixes. You just don't. And if you do, then you're not pushing yourself to high enough levels. You're really not. LFR, I've already mentioned that at the start. Of course, that is a brainless grind, and it needs to be. LFR wouldn't serve any purpose were it not. That being said, if everyone was brainless in it, then nothing would die. Professions, brainless grind, via quests or getting mats. It's a grind, give you that, but professions are always a grind. Again, I don't know what he's comparing it to. He doesn't actually, after this list, doesn't actually explain a great deal. And you think to yourself, when are you comparing it to? Are you comparing it to another game? In which case you should really say that, because it just sounds like you prefer another game. I have to say, Professions is more involved in Legion than it has ever been before. Ever. We had a few profession-based quests in Vanilla and TBC. I don't really remember too many since, if any. Maybe the odd small one. Whereas now we've got a proper profession. And we've also got... it is more involved. Like, when I just brought to mind something, again, this is where opinion comes into it. And our opinion, of course, everyone's opinions, everyone has prejudices, of course, because our opinions are always a product of two things. First of all, there's our perspective, but also, and something that colours our perspective, is our experiences. Our opinions are based on our experiences and then us thinking about them, those of us who think about them. And there was a video I was doing a week or two ago where I was talking about consumables and how, in Legion, I personally am finding for the first time ever, I'm having to properly farm for stuff. Now, that never really happened before. In vanilla, I did but once I got properly into raiding, I actually didn't find I had to farm anything to get the stuff I needed for my consumables. In TBC I did, but I had an alt that was a herbalist and miner. I used to just fly around for an hour and I'd get all the stuff I needed. Every couple of days I would just do that. That'd be fine. Or a couple of times a week, I think even would do it for the whole week. And then in Wrath, I largely missed Wrath out. Same with Catus, I can't remember there. And Mop, I didn't really farm at all, but you didn't need to because you had the farm. You had the farm. And then in WoD, we had the Garrison, which was the farm Mark II, gone supersize, where again, we didn't really have to do anything. So Legion is the first expansion where I've had to farm anything. But then someone replied that actually they spend very little time farming in Legion and spent more time before. So different experiences. And the same sort of thing, I suppose, might apply to professions. But like, take a herbalist and a miner now. I have a herbalist and a miner, but I haven't done a lot of it, so I haven't got like rank 3 in these things. So if I go out to get myself some herbs to supply my alchemist, it's going to take me a long arse time to get the herbs I require to get my consumables. I mean, I'd have to spend like a Saturday or Sunday afternoon doing it. And perhaps I should do a bit more of that, but I have so many other things to do as well. So I'd sooner just hand over the gold. Get a WoW token with real money, get the gold, spend the gold at the auction house. But that, I think, is a better system with the herbaling and herbalism and mining in particular. The fact that you can have a character who does do a lot of it and they'll get better at it, so they become more efficient at it. So you're getting rewarded for spending that extra time in there. And like professions, for example, like on my main... I'm really into professions traditionally, but I've done very little profession work in Legion. On my main character, Blacksmith and Enchanter, I'm not an 800 enchanter. I mean, we're half a year in, not an enchanter. Not 800, sorry. Because I'm only using the enchants as and when I need them. We don't need them that much. We don't change our gear that much. Blacksmithing, I am actually now 800, but I made a conscious decision to get to 800 only when I had the plans for the blacksmithing mount drop, which needs 800. I thought, well, I might as well get 800 now. But there was no impetus for me to do it beforehand, and it's quite a lot of work. But... So yeah, to describe it as a grind, it is a grind. To describe it as a brainless grind, on one sense it is, because all you're doing is quests, ultimately, and then grinding more until you get lucky with a prop, perhaps. But at the same time, again, compared to what? Was it less brainless at any time in the past? No, it was not. Absolutely not, no. And then they go into levelling itself. Levelling. Brainless grind. Yes. Yes, it is. As it has always been. Again, interesting that they describe quests as different to levelling. Because, of course, we level through quests. I know people who now level the 1 to 60 content do throw through dungeons. But they've also described normal dungeons as a grind as well. So it's a bit strange. At this point, I am now convinced that the person just wants to rant at the game. What it probably is down to, if I'm honest, is like the rest of us, they're a bit annoyed at the AP grind. That's actually what they're complaining about. But there was probably already posts about the AP grind. They wanted to make their own post because, you know, I want to start my own thread. And so they just list everything in the game and call it a brainless grind. Because, as I say, once you've already described quests as a brainless grind and dungeons as a brainless grind, why do you need to then put leveling in there as well? Because that's how you level. But it is. But it always has been. At what time in the game has it not? Even in vanilla, where people would describe leveling as harder, it was still, you could still, I mean, the meme was from the South Park episode, wasn't it? When you kill boars to get to a level cap. Obviously, you can't kill the same set of boars in Elwyn Forest to have got to level 60 back then. But there was nothing to stop you if, let's say, you were too dumb to do the quests or to play your character properly. There was nothing to stop you just grinding a load of mobs that respawned quite quickly. I mean, that was an efficient way to do it, potentially. It was just boring. And then move on to the next one at higher level and so on and keep doing that. Leveling has always, in any MMO, apart from like super hardcore ones potentially. I mean, I think there have been games where you can actively lose experience and levels. But in a game where that doesn't happen, then of course it's going to be. Because, well, you just hit things and you get experience. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But just as with any other content, if you apply your brains to it, you can do it faster and more efficiently. So there's still a reward for not doing the brainless grind and actually thinking your way through it. So again, yeah. But in terms of, and then they sort of go on to, besides heroic and mythic raid, there is nothing in the game with even the slightest form of challenge. And again, there you could come up with a difference of opinion. They obviously mythic raiding, yes, challenging. To describe heroic raiding as challenging, yes, it is for some. So is normal mode raiding for some, but they don't include that. Whereas I could say I find mythic plus dungeons rather more challenging than heroic mode raiding. When my guild, when a raid tier first opens, my raid guild will defeat the heroic content, the heroic stuff, in one night. We don't do split runs. We do it with our mains, and we'll defeat it in one night. So for us, it's not challenging. Do I go around moaning that heroic isn't challenging enough? No, because what I am is a mythic raider. I just need that to be challenging. And admittedly, in my guild, we make it more challenging than it technically should be. But still, we have a level of challenge there. So to pick on lower forms of the same content, a bit unfair. But yeah, so if I were to go through again as my summary, world quests, I think they're interesting and varied, and I think they're a good feature in Legion, and I applaud that. And in fact, it's one of the reasons, World Quest is one of the reasons why I haven't actually had to do loads and loads of Mythic Plus. I enjoy doing Mythic Plus dungeons, like now and then. Like at the moment, we're doing a few a week. We're doing a few a week because the people in my guild, we've got to a certain level in Mythic Plus where we're not likely to get upgrades from doing these dungeons, even the high level ones. We need to do a plus 15 so we get a high level item from a weekly cache, which has a reasonable chance of becoming an upgrade. But the dungeons themselves are not like, I mean, we can get to Titan Forge, all the rest of it, but the number of them you would have to do, you'd have to spam them all weekend to give yourself a decent chance of an upgrade. Not really worth it for the time. So we're in that sweet spot at the moment. We don't need it for the AP because we've maxed out our raiding artifacts at any rate, or those of us who are not pure DPS classes. We don't need to spam it for upgrades of gear because chances are it's not going to do that. So we only do a few a week for ourselves and to help others out in the guild as well. And that's a nice thing for me. But in the days where people were spamming it for artifact power, I did more than I do now, of course. But I did other content as well. And the world quest, one of those, I used to go around and do the world quests that rewarded artifact power. So I'd do the ones for the emissary cache. And then I'd go around and do other ones that gave artifact power. I would do my daily heroic dungeon for artifact power. I would pretty much do anything that wasn't PvP or excessive numbers of Mythic Plus dungeons. Just so that I didn't burn out on any one piece of content. Because when people talk about the AP grind, I think what they really talk about is the Mythic Plus dungeon grind. You know, no one gets burnt out by grinding AP as such. It's the fact you're doing the same content for it. And of course, you understand that of serious raiders because that was by far the most efficient way to do it. But for someone like me, then there were other ways of getting it as well, which may have not been as efficient, but it spread out the content and it seemed less of a grind because of it. The time walking dungeons, of course, they're a grind, and they're intended to be. It's just a new form of content, isn't it? We have the weekly quest from the Archmage in Dalaran, which varies each week. Sometimes it's pet battles, don't bother with that. Sometimes it's doing some mythic dungeons. Sometimes it's doing time walking dungeons as it was this week. And when it's time walking, you just do 5 of them quickly. Of course you do. What's wrong with that? Nothing. You've got the incentive because you get the extra coin. You get a cache that might have a nice upgrade for you. Did on my hunter, thank you very much. Nice upgrade storm relic. And it's a different piece of content. Which again, it's a bit like what I was doing. You vary the content. So people don't feel it's a grind so much if you're not doing the same type of thing. So they serve their purpose. LFR serves its purpose, same sort of thing there. Quests, I mean, behave yourself. I mean, they're varied and they tell a story. And if you go to quests, and some people do, I'm not knocking this, but if you go to quests, grab the quests off people, don't even read it, and just go to the area and kill things until it tells you the quest is completed, well, you're making it a brainless grind yourself, aren't you? At the end of the day. So Yeah, I think my conclusion would be the content that we have in Legion is actually the most varied and interesting that we've had in any expansion. The only thing it's actually missing, which I wouldn't mind a return back to, are the scenarios, like the 3-player scenarios we had in MOP. No. Was it? Yes, in MOP. So they went away. We didn't get those in WoD, and we haven't had them since. And we had single player. I mean, there were single player scenarios as well, weren't there? As part of a quest line on the Isle of Thunder as well. That was interesting. So that's the sort of content we've lost. But in terms of the other content, we've got all the interesting content we ever had, and we've got new stuff as well. So it's definitely varied. Whether it's to everyone's taste is another matter. But I would argue if you're going to just list all the content in it and just say, "Oh, boring grind," or "brainless grind," I'm just going to suggest that this game isn't for you, and that's all there is to it. And maybe you perceived that it was for you one time, and maybe it was. Maybe the game, as it was back then, really is the sort of game you want to play. Hence the people that call in for legacy servers. Or maybe it was just a time in your life when World of Warcraft was giving you something really special, and that time has passed. But because the game inevitably changes, you associate your new displeasure with the game as being because of those changes, when in actual fact maybe it's your changes. But anyway, those are my views. Everyone has their own views, and post them down below, of course. I do get time to read them. I don't always get time to reply to them, I'm afraid, but I do often get time to read them at least. So I hope you found it interesting as always. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.